Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Into a New Frontier for Valley City State University Athletics. The Vikings getting ready to move into a new conference. We took a little break for the 4th of July holiday. Now we're ready to get back into it, and the run-up will be pretty fierce because as this one comes to you today, we're probably in the neighborhood of about 4 or 5 weeks of actual games being played, and certainly less than that with players getting into organized practices and that type of thing. And so we're definitely in a transition phase for what's going on when it comes down to Viking athletics and ready to start up another season, which is always very exciting. This week's guest is the head women's basketball coach at Valley City State University. Vanessa Johnson joins us, and obviously the preparation work for basketball coming up this late fall and winter has been ongoing for a while. There's a lot of games to navigate, a lot of road miles to navigate in this new conference that we're getting into. We also want to get a catch up from the neck up, if you will, what's going on with the Viking women's basketball program. And Vanessa joins us today to give us a rundown of what's happening out there. Coach, I got to imagine as we get started today that this is probably more along the lines of, yeah, there's a lot to do, but man, it's a lot more stable than playing everybody 3 times like we did last year. And you got
Yeah.
2 there and 1 here, or 1 here and 2 there. This is a little bit better, I suppose.
Oh, for sure. And like you said, the stability behind it is what we're looking for. And so when you're talking about the pros of this, looking at a 22 game conference schedule is very appeasing for me.
It's obviously a good step in the right direction. There's a lot of things to navigate, though. So let's talk about that part before we move on to the X's and O's of basketball. When you first got introduced to what was going to happen with the Frontier and you started to see where the opponents were going to be and that type of thing, what challenges as far as travel, logistics, things like that jumped off the page for you to manage?
Definitely the distance. And then when we play, it was a greater discussion of are we going to keep the Friday Saturday format with the travel that's involved with this conference. And so it ended up we're keeping it Friday Saturday. We're just moving it 24 hours apart between those 2 games, and so the Saturday games are going to be a little bit later. But when you're looking at prep and the competition of this, the distance of travel, that's one thing. But then when you pair it with having to play 80 minutes back to back at nights, now it changes kind of how you prep, how you hopefully you can play a little bit deeper. And that's kind of our goal in recruiting this going into this was we're going to have to be deeper because we're going to have to play more kids with, especially when we're playing in Montana against that competition in that distance.
Well, let's talk about that when it comes down to the competition that you run into. These are new opponents for a lot of us. You've probably seen some of them in the non conference thing here or there. Maybe got a taste of it last year in Dickinson and that type of thing too with that non conference event that was there. But largely, this is new to a lot of fans. So tell us what we should know about the competitive nature of the Frontier League and what you've been getting ready for from that perspective.
Yeah, so on the women's side, they traditionally have 3 or 4 of their 6 teams nationally ranked and make the national tournament. Many years, I don't have the logistics exact numbers, but many years they have 2 of the final 4 teams, at least one for sure, in the national tournament. And so when you're talking on the women's basketball side, a very competitive league, very nationally known for their competition, and so obviously, the when we were looking at the challenges of the distance of travel, we're also looking at the challenges of the competition level that we're going to face. And so, yeah, we've seen a couple different teams in the non-conference when we've played in that Dickinson clash over Thanksgiving. But it's 2 of the 6 teams, and we've played the same 2 teams the last 3 years, and so haven't gotten a greater look into their conference. But when you watch them on film, they're a dynamic league across 1 through 6, and so it'll be a challenge for us. But I like it when we're looking at film.
Sometimes leagues develop a personality, and I talked with Michelle Micklejohn, the volleyball coach at Valley City State. We talked about seeing them in the national tournament a couple of years ago, and the teams that they brought to the tournament weren't just good. They were big, they were physical. They sort of favored that kind of body versus the fast or motion type offense that happens in volleyball. Do you see anything similar there in women's basketball? Do they favor the big physical approach, or do they like to get out and run?
No, they definitely play a true traditional. When you're thinking like old school basketball, that's kind of what you see when you play Montana. Most of those Montana schools, they have big post players that they play a lot through. When you're talking about Carroll and Providence, and even when we played Rocky Mountain here this past year, they have size, and that was kind of when we're looking at film. This past year was the first year that we've kind of had size in a long time, and so it did play in our favor to be able to have three post players going against them, but that's going to be a night in, night out type of a deal, and especially when you're going out there. Now, when you play the North Star schools or the previous North Star schools, now that's back to fast and like you guys have all seen the transition style game. So it's going to be different because you're going to see two very different styles of basketball. That's for sure.
When you have to recruit towards that, I've always kind of wondered about that, how the makeup of the conference that you play in affects who you want to go after when it comes down to recruiting. And I think that sometimes we overthink that because at the end of the day, you just want to get really good players and you can work with that no matter what. But is there a sort of aspect of looking over your shoulder as to the top team in the league has this, I need this to be able to compete with it? Is there some of that that goes on? Do you try to match up through the recruiting process?
Oh, for sure. And part of that is, yeah, you recruit to your identity and who you are and what you want to try to get accomplished. But obviously, you'd be naive to say that, oh, I only worry about me and not what the other schools are doing. Absolutely not. You have to, if you're looking at top teams in the nation consistently, who are they getting? How are they playing? How can we match up to that? And who can we go get to help us? Those are all questions in the recruiting that we answer while trying to still keep our identity and who we are. So it's a puzzle piece, but obviously, yes, we keep a close look on those teams that consistently make the national tournament and how they play and how would we be able to beat them and see what kind of kids we could go get.
From a travel standpoint, Vanessa, in talking with Michelle, there's going to be a couple of weeks where the team just doesn't come home. They're going to go out there. They've got back-to-back weekends, so they're going to go to school online and handle it that way. It's a different feel, obviously. Do you have some wrinkles like that in your own schedule?
Thankfully, no. Our schedule panned out to be pretty good. We've done it where no one really takes those two long trips twice. It does happen in our case where we go to Bellevue, Dakota State, which is a longer trip for us, and then turn around the next week and head out to Montana. But it's not two Montana trips, and so the travel does definitely increase. But we're not in a situation like Michelle is of where you're out there 2 weekends in a row and just, okay, we're going to have to just stay because that's going to be the cheaper route. And our kids are going to go to school online, but we don't have that. So thankfully, at least this year, I know that there's talk of trying to switch the scheduling around for next year's, and we could run into that. But this year, we've fared pretty well.
And that's good when you're getting the introductory year of this thing. I know that when you were going through a scheduling wrinkle, I think there was some talk of, was it Thursday, Saturday, trying to build in a day in the middle? And can you take us through how that conversation worked? And is there a thought that if this doesn't work, you might go back to that?
Oh, for sure. I know that a lot of the coaches would really like to see the Thursday, Saturday format just to allow a day of rest in between, a day of prep in between. Because when you're talking 12 hours on a bus and you're trying to expect these kids to then go play 80 minutes back to back, you're not putting the student athlete in a good situation. And we really have to kind of look at the prep of what it takes to play at this level and to play 80 minutes at a high level. And so that was kind of the discussion of that. But along with that, when you're traveling those distances, is the missed class time and kind of the budgetary look at it. This is going to cost a lot more money when you're having to leave now on probably a Tuesday night or a Wednesday if you're going to try to break that bus trip up. And then you play Thursday, then you have a day off Friday, and you play Saturday. You're still not making it all the way home Saturday, and so or maybe you're looking at getting it overnight Saturday. So when it came down to it, the class time that was missed and the budgetary side of it, we can't swing it right now. And I know that from the coaches standpoint, they're going to keep fighting it every year. They want to put it on the ballot to re-talk about. because of the competitive side of what we're looking at in that scheduling. But and when you talk to administrations across the league, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to them to kind of add in that extra day.
It does sound like it's safe to say, though, this thing will end differently than it starts. It seems like there's a lot of room for a lot of wrinkles year in and year out, Vanessa. And you're kind of just doing this. It's not a 1 year trial of being in the league, but it's a 1 year trial of how you are in the league. Does it sound like that?
For sure. And I sit on we're trying to make the policy procedure handbook, the bylaws, and that's exactly right. What we do this year is going to be kind of the test dummy and see, okay, what worked, what didn't work. And we have a lot of coaches. When you look at the men's and women's side, now you're looking at 20 some coaches instead of just the 12 that we were currently working with. So we got a lot of opinions, a lot of voices that we have to take into consideration, and the ADs and presidents, they've done a pretty good job of trying to get this together.
All right, well, let's turn attention to your team. This last year, you had some emergences of some new talent that turned some things in a different direction for you, got to play a little differently because of some players that you brought in the middle. At the same time, there's going to be an absence out on the perimeter that you've got to replace as far as a shooter is concerned. And so there was obviously some approaches that you had to take in filling some holes out there. So tell us how the team might look differently and some of the new personnel that will be there for us this year.
Yeah, for sure. It doesn't go unspoken that we're going to be missing a huge piece in scoring, and then we lose Elise that kind of brought us the jumper cable, right? She was our spark plug that kind of brought the energy, did all those dirty work stuff. And so we're missing two players that did a lot for us in a lot of different ways. And so when you're looking at recruiting, you're not going to replace them in one kid. And I also talked about this to our returning group that, okay, we can go out and recruit some of these kids, but we also need some of you to step up as well. And you have the capability to do so. And so in this off season, we're looking at you to kind of make up for these two kids that we're missing. And then in recruiting, we can piece that together, but you're counting on kids that are new to the program, that are trying to learn the system, that are trying to figure everything out. And so we really looked at our returning group and said, okay, here's your weaknesses, here's your strengths, here's the things that we're going to look for you to do next year. So we really need you to hammer that out in the off season. And with the kind of year that we ended on last year, the momentum that we had, the energy in the locker room is different. They're excited. They want to take on those challenges. They got to see what it took to beat some of those nationally ranked teams, but they're also not satisfied. They also believe that we could do more. And so they have that kind of in their back pocket when they're prepping for the new year. But as far as recruiting, we got 2 freshman kids and 3 transfers as of right now. We got Olivia Backus's sister and Avery Backus, and she plays very much so like Olivia. She's just more of a true point guard style. Liv is more off the bounce wing kid, but that'll be fun to have the sisters playing together again. We did get a shooter out of Brandon, Minnesota, in Hadley Bonnie. She is strictly, and that's hopefully we can play her for Ash and she can go in and launch some threes for us, because that's what she's really, really good at in high school game. And then we added 3 junior college kids that all played in the national tournament, and one of them won the JUCO national championship. So all kids that know how to win and know what it takes to compete at a high level. So we'll see how we can integrate them, but we're excited.
When we look back at last year, we had made the mention a couple of different times that if you could play the top half of the league every week, you'd have been the league champion, because you kept beating those teams that were up there. And it was those teams that were halfway in the pack or, towards the bottom that would find a way to beat you. And it seemed like the difference was if they got physical with the perimeter, they had a bit of an advantage on Valley City State. If you could keep the physicalness inside, you were just fine. And that's maybe not what you were expecting to happen last year. So is that something that stood out at the end of the year that you felt like maybe needed to be addressed?
Oh, for sure. That's and when you go and play out in Montana, it's going to be physical across the board, 1 through 5. And so when you look at film and you see how Bellevue kind of took us out of things with their physicality, that's kind of a red flag for us, because that's what it's going to be night in, night out when you play those frontier schools. They play that physical style, old school basketball, and so for sure talking to our guards about okay things that we need to do in the off season, and part of that is handling contact. One, getting open through contact. Two, handling trying to get downhill or making your decisions through contact, and then obviously three, finishing through contact, and whether that's on the perimeter or inside. We just had that's a huge red flag when you're watching us of can our guards handle physicality, and they're going to see it in the Frontier. So
Our thanks to Vanessa Johnson, the head coach of Viking women's basketball, for joining us here today on Into a New Frontier. Still to come, coming up next week, we'll be talking with some of the other sports that will have appearances in the fall. We're planning on talking with our golf coach and also with the baseball coach at Valley City State, and more to go as we get ready for those first dates coming up. Remember, the end of August, the Vikings have a week 0 football game with Dickinson State to start off the appearance of football in the new league as well. It's getting close, and we're looking forward to starting another season of Into a New Frontier and into a new season of Viking athletics. Thank you for being with us today here with Into a New Frontier.